Private Dream Journal. This is for private use only, not to be redistributed as a podcast, at least not yet. For the last few nights I've been having very vivid dreams after a prolonged period of not being able to access any recollection of having dream activity. The first couple of nights centered around a location. I kept having dreams in which there was imagery and word discussion, as in, like, I heard dialogue referencing the golden ivory tower. And now that's a trope beyond a trope. That's like a cliche wrapped inside of a cliche, the golden ivory tower. But imagine a world in which all of life had ceased to function except for one mechanized golden ivory tower of manufacturing, which managed to survive the collapse of all society and all the systems around it. Self-sustaining to the end, this golden ivory tower, which one sounds better? I think golden ivory, right? Instead of ivory golden. This tower proceeded to operate without any living supervision or any living operation or operators. And its functions are to manufacture semi-sentient, cybernetic, artificial, ambulatory beings of talking nuts and bolts, which can receive liquid crystal consciousness. And it's a horror story of semi-sentient, not quite fully self-aware creatures, mechanical creatures that live out their lives trapped inside of this tower, not realizing that they're in a meaningless loop of manufacturing themselves in order to destroy themselves and each other, because it's caught in a closed loop and there's no off-ramp. There's no, from top to bottom, each floor is engaged in all kinds of activity, and it's a massive structure and it probably has many subterranean features, etc. So there's mysteries to explore and adventures to be had and lifetimes to be lived, unaware of the various stages, the various phases, right? On the floors in which the artificial wombs that 3D print the yet to be born artificial bodies, there's a collective lack of awareness of what happens next. In the rooms wherein these artificial wombs are violated to extract the living artificial infant body avatars, it's a different collection of people, right? And by people, I mean other living mechanical beings that are part of the process, but not realizing that the process they're attending to is that of the very creation and destruction of their own kind. They are so objectified in their own mind to themselves, and they objectify all others so much that they don't realize what they're doing, that they're tending to their own people in a malicious, dark, strict, tyrannical way because of a lack of clarity that it's all interconnected. And as you can imagine, there's a sort of life journey that gets simulated, but is hyper compartmentalized and lived out in small, very crowded rooms on different levels of this gilded tower. So the catch-22 comes down to when the aha moment is had of like, oh shit, is this what's really going on here? Do the protagonists, the collection of those who have achieved this realization, do they decide? Do they choose? Do they proceed to destroy, to tear it all down, as they had once envisioned before coming to a full understanding of what is going on? Or do they transcend their limited, trauma-based, retribution-oriented thinking and transcend to a new understanding and find a way to rectify what it is that's wrong with the tower, right? It's all like a horror show. Let's be clear. It's all the equivalent of, if we were doing this with real people characters, it would be some sort of meat grinder Madame Guignon of grotesquerie play of gore and mutilation and like unthinkable things done to other living beings as if it were commonplace and non, what's the word I'm looking for here? Just commonplace, as if it were non-controversial, right? If disemboweling people alive was what you did from, 10 in the morning until right before lunch, because that's your job. And it was always your job, and it will always be your job, and no one had ever thought to question it. And you never recognized those whom you disemboweled alive and like ripped out the entrails of as other people. If you had objectified them and hyper-vilified them to the point of denialism, of nihilistic life denialism. That's what the analogy is, right? With these mechanical creatures trapped in a torture chamber body shop of constant tinkering, renovation, and seemingly sociopathic assembly and disassembly of others, which are different enough from themselves as creatures that they refuse to recognize their autonomy, I'm trying to find a word that would be the animatronic, cybernetic equivalent of their humanity. So we're going to revisit this space, this location in Wattpad to really anchor it down. But as this is part of my new exploration of a disjointed creative process, it's going to become a podcast episode first. But this is just... Oh, wait, I just said it wasn't a podcast episode. That was cosplay. I'm going to cosplay that these are private dreams which are being reviewed by someone else as part of couching or embedding this content, this audio content of me and my dreams as part of a sub-series of the podcast now that it's been rebooted. And then, with any luck, talking about it and revisiting it will facilitate my brain in activating a better, like, longer-term recall process so that I can later, independently, maybe with the podcast playing, in the background, sit down and write about it, which is the problem I always have. The ideas come or the dreams happen, and then 48 hours later, it's fluff, and it's gone. It's just poof. Those are all sound effects that I'm trying to create, right, and make normal. Poof. Should be a standard social sound effect that we all make while speaking to each other. And then suddenly they went, whew. Okay, so that was one set of dream imagery. And you can imagine it would make an interesting short story or an interesting short film or something in an episodic. The dream I woke up to this morning was much more about people, but there was a similar sort of issue of objectification. I was dreaming about two characters that I guess I've dreamt about before, because there was content that felt familiar, as if I've reviewed this before. And it was curiously social media content that was turning up in my dreams. And I felt as if I have had made, or will have had made in some distant future dimension, social media graphic content about these characters. And I don't know that I actually have. But they are a pair of disabused, misunderstood, vilified twins. This is the dark, tragic trauma of the I need a good last name with a T in it, the Tedeschi. I don't know where I'm getting that. That's a weird name that sounds like it's already loaded. It might be not usable because of potential who knows what it belongs to. But the Tedeschi twins, they get vilified as trolls, as terror trolls, and they are sweet, gentle, awkward, humble, and homely looking twins that are a little and there's a condition that's, that they have a bit of the fictional giantism. And then, I mean, they have some sort of, there are real life conditions that cause body proportion extremism in human species, just like there's conditions that create body proportion I guess it's still extremism, but in the small direction. I was referencing body that are extremely large. So I want to find something that's respectful, but also sort of dystopian futurism. Like, I don't want to say they have that these twins, and they're male and female, but they're mildly androgynous. They lean towards the androgynous. Like the one that's actually a male has the booty that gets just confused as female more often, has the curvature, has a sort of like curvy femme body going on, but he's the one with the penis and the masculine energy, just sort of like androgynously curvy legs, I guess, and some sort of deceptive man jiggle up top. And the female has the more, like, easily confused for a male, masculine, butch body, but is the one with the actual Giannis, and the one that can, could, should, would, in theory, storytelling-wise, and forgive the forgive the spoilers, but will someday, have a magical, mysterious pregnancy, storytelling-wise. Oh, I guess we should stop and pause and think about that, and maybe remind me in the distant future to, whenever I get around to talking about these things, to do a disclaimer that when I do, and this is just to be redundant here, because it's out of chronological order, but whenever I share on any of my shows about my literary work, it's going to be full spoilers because I'm literally in development. So instead of being anti-spoilers and nerdly, freakish about oh, don't give me no spoilers, it's about knowing everything and being on the ground floor and being part of the in crowd that boosts my capacity through support and collaborative interaction to create and hopefully one day finish the epically absurdly long multi-volume book series that I'm slaving away at. Having said all that, these twins, let me just wrap up there was less concrete detail and more sort of character study imagery about them in this dream. But they definitely were raised in captivity, torn away mysteriously from their parents at an early age, of which they presume, the death of. The two of them might have a very, very private, very closeted argument in which one believes there is still hope that they might find their living parents. Another one is cynically committed, just fucking over it, and refuses to acknowledge the possibility. Whether you consider it a belief or just realism, the other individual is dead certain that their parents could not have survived the vague, gory, nasty, dream-like memories that they have of their few moments together. And of course, that becomes a driving issue. What is their origin story? Who are their parents? What happened? Have they been lied to? Is there a conspiracy that has attended to them? Which there is. Spoiler. There totally is. There's a group of people. There's a group of nefarious-minded men who keep an eye out for potential examples of what would be the equivalent of meta-humans in the Zeppoverse. I'm wary of using that term, although it's super crossed over. It doesn't seem to belong to any one particular cinematic universe. They talk about them in the DC universe. They use that term in Marvel universe, both legacy, antiquated, fringe Marvel movies, and I think at least once or twice in the new official MCU continuity, as well as in other places. But I also want to be more original than that. But it's the right term. It's just already sort of overused, and it also sounds weird to me. It always sounded weird to me. I always thought it was a problematic but very accurate term. At any rate, the nefarious occult group of toxic, greedy, profiteering, elitist men keep an eye out for metahumans for all the wrong reasons, all the reasons that you wouldn't want to get picked up if you were a metahuman. And so there's that lingering threateningly over the horizon. There's also a different group, which factually does not have nefarious motivations, but that is secretive and occultish in their own right for their own purposes, and despite being the good women get perceived at first and easily talked about by others trying to influence the twins as nefarious. But these women are guardians of those that need guarding from that maternal, motherly, mama bear kind of perspective, the sort of nurturing protection that men seem to be incapable of conceptualizing for themselves when they're caught up in their own toxic ego man culture. The twins were always sort of approaching the uncanny valley of beauty slash, what's the opposite of beauty instead of just ugly, right? There must be some inverse of beauty. Needless to say, in terms of what I understand about them that I want to capture for future reference as we proceed to write about them, is that they have always attracted curiosity, attention, and inspired suspicion and fear, and even revulsion. That confusing kind of revulsion where you're still drawn in, you can't look away, but you're disgusted. And it's not that they're hideous. I don't want them to be imagined or perceived of in that way. It's just that they're creepy and unusual. So not Jim Henson Muppet-looking people, but Sweet Tooth? Is that the name of that show? I haven't watched it yet, but I've seen enough of the ads that I see that they're clearly going for some sort of supernatural high fantasy of a new independent design, and there's something cute going on with their unusual people. So just sort of that kind of direction. They're creepy but adorable, but creepy, and have always been. And they are ageless in their visage, so that no matter how tall they got, no one was ever really sure what age they were. So people were always incorrectly attributing an incorrect age. In fact, they've always been larger than their age should allow for. Therefore, most people, despite being ageless in their appearance, in the way their body and face look, their size always grants them the inaccurate assumption that they're more mature than they might actually be. And that's a recurring issue which caused them a lot of fucked up trauma growing up. And in whatever present day the storytelling moment happens, they are pillars of strength that don't understand their own power. And they have retained enough of their innocence, however that survived the traumas of growing up in a cynical urban setting after being discovered and brought to the city, right? Because they are indeed country bumpkin, kind of up from in deep in the hills kinds of folk, and they miss their much more organic surroundings, and we get this sort of first time in the city coming of age, but we don't know how old they are. They could be in their early 30s. They could be 19. And you just don't know, because like beautiful women with flawless skin, they appear to be ageless. It's just impossible. It's impossible to peg. And given one's own perspective and presumptions and assumptions and projections, it'd be just as easy to assume and project that they were adolescents, barely on the cusp of adulthood and a little bit slow at it at that, or just Peter Panish, impossibly youthful adults in their 30s that mysteriously, charmingly get away with being, weird and awkward and youthful, but also have the capacity to be authoritative and even frightening in their sort of semi-unconscious expressions of their power, because it isn't until, later in the storytelling that they come to terms with the powers they don't realize that they have, being the unusual creatures that they are. And of course, there's someone out to kill them, which we don't know where that comes from. But there's definitely a very serious threat against their lives for reasons which must be discovered and unearthed, and from antagonists that are unidentified. So at first it's like shit keeps happening to them that could be rationalized away as coincidence or sheer dumb luck or acts of God or whatnot. But eventually it becomes clear, after casting suspicion at the nefarious group of profiteering men, that a third, hitherto undiscovered force is out to obliterate them in as easy to get away with, impossible to criminalize and get caught for kind of fashion. And that, dear friends, is the thoughts I've got on the last few days, last couple nights worth of vivid dreaming. It's quite strange that I literally experienced almost absolutely zero dream recall all of last year. And the few times that I did, I think I made a recording, or if I didn't, I talked about it on the podcast. I don't know. But when the dreams come, I'll be here to journal about them.